I'm not going to be naming any of the dogs Toto. And that's not a helpful comment right now. You know, I'm getting ready to do a school video, and those kinds of things nervous me. We started. Sorry, everybody. Hi, this is Teresa Rakowski, HM101. Today we're going to be having some more fun with weights and measures. So what we're going to do is a formula. In baking, we often call what you might have heard called recipes, we'll call them formulas because they're more precise. The ingredients are weighed rather than measured in cups, but some people still call them recipes, but I call them formulas. So I am going to weigh it on a scale, and I'm going to do it in metrics, and it's going to be super easy, super fun, nothing you need to memorize, but I'd like for you to write down the ingredients and the quantity of the ingredients, because there is something that we're going to do a little bit later. Okay, so the formula we're going to do today, it's for these double chocolate, gorgeous, glorious cookies in the style of a New York bakery called Leavening Bakery. And these are them. It looks like my baby brother's stepping on them. He would if he was here. Okay, so the style of these cookies is they're almost like cake-like. They're really, really thick, and this is what we're looking for on the inside. It's not necessarily the texture of like a typical chocolate chip cookie, and I'm going to show you how we work at getting that, not only with the quantity of the ingredients, but how we handle the dough. Okay, I want to show off this little plate because I think there's someone watching who will recognize it. This is a student who was in another class who brought something delicious, delicious cake on this plate. Okay, so I'm going to spin the camera around, and we're going to talk about the ingredients, and we're going to scale them, and we're going to put this dough together. I'm going to tell you right now, just in case I forget at the end, when it comes time to bake these cookies, they get baked at 375 degrees for 13 minutes, and then we turn down the oven, and we bake them at 350 degrees for about another 10 minutes. What we're looking for when we pull them out of the oven is, you see these cracks right here. These cracks, they're going to be glistening, and they're still going to look wet when you pull them out, and that's good because we want the interior to be kind of like what they call par baked, like not all the way baked. So if the cracks are still glistening and shiny, we're going to pull them out and let them sit on that hot pan for about 20 minutes before we move them. So a lot of sort of steps that are counterintuitive. If you're a real, cookie baker and you're used to like creaming methods and things like that, we're going to switch things up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to spin you around, and let's look at our ingredients, and let's make some cookies. Again, you guys, that's Leavening Bakery, Levain, I believe, in New York City, and they're just voted the best cookies all over the place. So I think it's not just because they're just big and gorgeous and glorious looking. They're really delicious if you like that kind of a cookie. Okay, so we're going to be working in grams, and we're going to be working on our handy dandy scale here. So we're going to get used to this, and I just want you to be really comfortable with it and see that it is really actually easy after all. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to make sure that our unit is set to grams. And it wants me to set it down before I do that. Pounds and ounces. And here we are on grams. You see the little G right there? Okay, so this is one of the benefits to working on a scale. When you're in beginning baking class, we're probably not going to encourage you to do it this way, but when you are in a professional bakery, you probably will be expected to do things this way. It's just makes things go really, really quickly, and you're not messing up or dirtying up a lot of bowls that take time to wash dishes, because of course time is money. Okay, so I have set the bowl on top of the scale, and I'm going to tare it. T-A-R-E means setting it to 0. And in this bowl, I'm going to put 454 grams of butter, 260 grams of brown sugar, and 150 grams of sugar, regular granulated sugar. So be sure and write that down. I'm going to go ahead and start with the brown sugar. And while I'm putting this brown sugar in here, I want to tell you something. If you, we're looking for 260 grams. If you are out of brown sugar, I don't know if you know this, but you can just make yourself up some really quickly by putting regular white granulated sugar in a bowl and then adding some molasses, just sort of drizzle it in. And once you've poured that molasses in there, just rub it together with your hands. Just put your hands in there and we were just about there. Okay, 260 grams. Okay, so like I said, if you're out of brown sugar, you should always have a bottle of molasses hanging out in your cabinet. Put white sugar in a bowl, drizzle some molasses in there, and then rub it together with your hands, and you will have this beautiful, beautiful, just like really moist brown sugar that smells so good. And I do it all the time. Okay, so we have our 260 grams. So now all we have to do is hit the tare button again. And then I can add my 150 grams of granulated sugar. And I am not a glove-wearing kind of a cook. And you don't have to be either. If I had a cut or anything open on my hand, I would be. Otherwise, there's just like no way. I'm not wearing gloves. I need to feel the food. I need to touch the food. Okay, so I'm at 150 grams of sugar. And now I'm going to push that button again, that tare button again. I'm going to add the butter, which is 454 grams, which I'm going to give you a little helpful hint that is actually a pound of butter. The butter I'm using today, I get this at Costco. It's the European style butter. It's only $2 a pound. You have to buy it 4 pounds at a time. But it's really wonderful. What makes it European style is European style butter is cultured a little bit, like think about like adding culture to make yogurt or something like that. And it's nowhere near as tangy as yogurt, but it just gives it a little bit more character than regular American style butter, and it has less water in it. And we like having a little bit less water because water and agitation together, they work on the protein in the flour to make gluten. And in some cases that's great. Like if you think about eating a bagel or pizza dough that's really chewy, that has a lot of gluten development and we like that. But we don't like a lot of gluten development in cookies or in cake. We don't want them to be like tough and chewy like bagels. So this is the point where we typically call this creaming, but I use cold butter. A lot of times in cookie baking, we use room temperature butter because we want it to break down really quickly and whip up and create some air pockets, but we don't want that. Here, we're doing this almost more like a pie dough. We want it to be crumbly. So I have this cold butter that is mixing with the brown sugar and the white sugar right now. And then this is the time, everybody, where you ask yourself, okay, what can I be doing? Whenever you're in a professional kitchen and you have downtime, think, what can I be doing? Well, I now have eggs coming up in my formula here pretty soon. So while this is mixing, I can go ahead and crack my eggs. So here we have 4 eggs in a formula. It would typically say that we want 8 ounces of eggs or a cup of eggs or half pound of eggs. But here, because I'm at home and I don't want to have like, 12 grams of eggs hanging out in my refrigerator, I'm just going to go ahead and use 4 eggs. And I'm going to go ahead and beat them up. Because again, you guys, you will see when you get to baking that gluten rules your life. When I add these eggs, eggs are mostly water. I'm going to be adding a lot of water, and that water plus that agitation, that's what gets that gluten development going, and I want to limit that as much as possible. So if I beat these eggs up ahead of time, I won't have to count on the mixer to beat the eggs up for me, and that would create gluten development. I'm not crazy about that idea right now. Okay, so this is what I have. You can see I didn't let that mixer go very quickly. I didn't let it go very long. I don't have a super smooth mixture. I still see some lumps of butter in there, but they're pretty small lumps of butter. I'm going to keep them like that and proceed. In most cookie dough recipes or formulas, we would let that keep beating until it was smooth, and we might even keep beating it until it was really fluffy. And then we would add liquid, but we're not doing it in that order today, not for these Leavening style cookies. Okay, now we have all kinds of dry ingredients. So let me get you to write these down, please. That's going to be part of your exercise that we're doing later on. Okay, so I'm going to turn the scale back on. And again, check the unit to make sure that it's not happy. Okay. With some scales, you can do that. You can start with the bowl on there, and some of them it makes them mad. This one makes it mad. Okay. So I'm on grams because I'm scaling in grams, and it's calling for 400 grams of all-purpose flour. So I'm going to tell you something. I don't sift a whole lot of ingredients. The times that I sift, where I actually break out a sifter and sift, is if the formula calls for cake flour or cocoa. And the reason being is cocoa still has about 20% of the fat in it. They remove about 80%, and so it has lumps. It has lumps of fat, so that's something that should be sifted. The other ingredient is cake flour. Cake flour is different from all-purpose flour in that it has a little less protein, and that protein is what I mentioned, that the liquid and the agitation that creates the gluten development or the chewiness, and here that's not what we're desiring in these cookies. So we are going to use part cake flour and part all-purpose flour, but when that cake flour has less protein than that all-purpose flour, something needs to make up for that. So what makes up for it is it has more starch, and starch has lumps. So if I see cake flour, I know that I'm going to sift. So those are the two ingredients that I know that I'm going to have to sift with a sifter. Otherwise, I could just go ahead and take this guy, put all my ingredients in here, and do this to disperse the smaller ingredients like baking soda throughout the larger ingredients like flour. But I want to get rid of lumps, so I'm busting out the big guy. Okay, so I need 400 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm going to tear that again because I put the sifter on it. Now, this is something I'm going to tell you. Just off the top of my pretty head, just because I know it, that chart that we use, that I referenced in Module 1, says that a cup of all-purpose flour weighs 120 grams. So I put this in here, and I'm at 142 grams. So that means I would, if I was doing this with a measuring cup, I would already have made a mistake. I would not be getting the results that I wanted. But because I'm weighing, I could take this measuring cup and I can do anything I want with it. For that first scoop, I just sort of packed it in there when I measured it. For this scoop, I will like fluff it up with a whisk, like some recipes tell you to do, and then I will spoon it in here. And let's see how many grams we get from this one. Okay, the last one, where I just sort of scooped it out of there, we got 142 grams. When I sort of fluffed it up with the whisk and spooned it in, like a lot of recipes tell us to do. Let's see what we get. We got 120. That was 120. So that tells us in that chart that that's the way they want us to measure it. And it is. That's typically the way a recipe will tell you to measure it. I'm still going to go for 400. And like I said, since we are weighing it, since we are scaling it, it doesn't matter how we go about getting this flour in here. Okay, so now I am, okay. Oh. Okay, 400 grams. Oh, I'm lying, I have one more round to go. Okay, now we're at 400 grams. So then I see the next ingredient that I need are the 400 grams of cake flour, which actually, I don't think that that's right. No, it's only supposed to be 200 grams of cake flour. Gosh Guys, why do I try to lead you astray like this? I don't know. I don't know what gets into me. Okay, we want 200 grams of cake flour. So let me tell you this, y'all. If you don't have cake flour, that's totally cool. Does not matter. You can make your own cake flour at home by simply go ahead and Google this, say how to substitute cake flour or how to make cake flour. I'm going to tell you off the top of my head that it is just a matter of adding cornstarch to all-purpose flour, and that reduces the protein content. Okay, so now I need 200, so I'm going to go ahead and tare this. It's at 0 again, and I'm at 198, 200. Okay. So far we have our 400 grams of all-purpose or 200 grams of cake flour in here, and my sifter's starting to get a little bit full, so I'm going to go ahead and make some room just by tapping this on the heel of my hand. And now I've made some space, I can go ahead and start adding the other ingredients, one of which is cocoa. And for the cocoa, we need 100 grams of the cocoa powder. And so this is what I want to show you with this cocoa powder. Okay, this is just regular old cocoa powder. I got it at Costco. I think it's like that fair trade cocoa. It's nice, it's chocolatey. And this is black cocoa powder. This is the thing. The reason that I combine them, this one is richer and looking and dark and gorgeous, but it's been processed with an alkali, and there's nothing wrong with that. It has its advantages. I'll tell you why they do it, but it's not as chocolatey as this one. It tricks us. So if you think about eating an Oreo has that really, really, really dark cocoa in it, but it's not the chocolatiest cookie that you've probably ever eaten. By doing a Dutch process, by processing it with alkali, it makes it a dark, rich color. It's more soluble. It dissolves easier in recipes, but it's not as chocolatey. So you give up some of the chocolate flavor. So that's why I combine the two to get that flavor and to get that color. And we are looking for 100 grams of cocoa. So I'm going to go ahead and hit tare. And I'm going to go ahead and use, and this is up to you, you guys. You don't even have to mix them. It's just something that I like to do. I'm going to do about 75 grams of the cocoa powder and then about 25 grams of the black cocoa powder. And actually there's one that I really love called Cocoa Rouge. It has a reddish color to it, and it's sort of a nice in-between color. Okay, so there we have our 100 grams of cocoa powder. I'm going to make a little bit of space. Okay, so for our leavening agents. So leavening agents, these are called chemical leavening agents because they are processed, they're commercially processed, as opposed to like yeast. Yeast is like wild yeast or a starter that is a natural leavening agent, and these are called chemical leavening agents. So the 100 grams of cocoa powder, I'm going to go ahead and tare that. I'm sorry, that would be a mistake. The 8 grams of baking powder. This is what I'm going to do for this little tiny bit. I am going to get rid of our big bowl. And I'm going to work, I don't know if I can get that display in the frame here. I don't think it's showing up very well. But I'm going to go ahead and measure that into a smaller bowl. So if I make a mistake, it's going to be easier for me to correct it. And I'm looking for 8 grams of baking powder. So the, oh, I'm sorry, this is baking soda. 9 grams of baking soda. Okay, difference being, you guys, and we will talk about it in baking classes so much more, but just to simplify it, I'm going to tell you baking soda causes spread, baking powder causes kick or lift. A lot of times we don't even see baking powder as a leavening agent in cookies, but you can see these are cakey. We want lift like we would in cake or biscuits, so that's the purpose of this baking powder. 8 grams of baking powder. Oh, so close. And you'll see a lot of times in muffins, see it went from 7 to 9, that's what, okay. In muffins, you'll see that a lot of times we have the baking powder and the baking soda. If you think about a muffin, we want kick, we want lift, we want spread for that muffin top. So we get both. So here we have a little baking soda because we want a little spread that we typically want in cookies. And we have baking powder because unlike other cookies, we want these to be sort of cake-like. And then for the salt, we're looking for 9 grams. And remember, we talked about different types of salt, have different saltiness. Like if you look at kosher salt under a microscope, it's like this hollow pyramid. So there's a lot of air in there. So it's not as salty as table salt. If you look at that under a microscope, it's a solid little cube. But this scale is the great equalizer. If we're talking about a weight, if we're talking about salt in grams or in ounces, we can use any kind of salt and we're going to get the appropriate amount of saltiness. Okay, so here we're tiered. We want 9 grams of salt. And then we're at 9 grams. So you guys, those cookies for me could have used a little more salt. So I'm going to do like almost 12. Okay, so review your formula as you go along. Yes, I did the flour. I did that flour. I did the cocoa powder. I did all the leavening agents. I did the salt. Okay, I'm good to go. I can proceed. And here I'm just sifting again because I have cocoa powder and because I have cake flour. And you see that we have these little lumps. That fat is holding that cocoa powder together. So I'm going to force that through the sieve to break that up. I'm going to go ahead and do this as well, just so that once it's in the bowl, it doesn't have to mix so much, because as soon as that flour comes in contact with the liquid and then it mixes, that's when that gluten development starts. Okay, my friend, it's going to be easier if I go ahead and pull you off, so that I don't get these dry ingredients falling over the edge of the bowl. So if you don't have one of these mixers, you could certainly make these cookies. You can make them with like the handheld electric beaters, which you can get for like $10 at the thrift store for even less. I didn't even have one of these until I was well into my 30s because, you know, priorities. Almost everybody told me I had to feed and shelter my child every single day. So there was that. But you can, and even if you don't have the handheld beaters, you can just like do it with a wooden spoon and smash it with your hands. It will work. Especially with this one, because we don't have to work at getting a whole bunch of air into it. You can see I'm starting this off at a really low speed because I still want to be friends with this. And if I started at a high speed and it flew in my face, we would no longer be friends. Okay, at this point, what I'm looking for is this to be just like a really crumbly mixture. And you've probably seen when you make biscuit dough or pie dough where it says to mix it until the batter has sort of the consistency of meal. Sometimes it says peas, if we want to be really flaky for pie dough. But we want this to get kind of mealy. Again, the reason that we're doing this is because we want that fat to get incorporated with the flour and do what's called shortening it, which means that it'll be more of like a crumbly cookie and less of a chewy cookie. This is what we're looking for. We know to stop when we have sort of this uniform crumbly mixture. This looks like dirt. Okay. And this, I know you guys, it's so weird. It is very different from a typical cookie mixture. I'm gonna use this. This is called a bowl scraper. You can get them like at restaurant supplies. They're like $1. Sometimes they don't even charge you. But this is great because the attachment doesn't hit the bottom of the bowl. So we need to make sure that we have a uniform mixture and bring anything from the bottom of the bowl up to the top. Okay, this is a glorious thing to have at your house. This big, gigantic bunch of chocolate chips. And let's go ahead and write this ingredient down. You're gonna need 680 grams of chocolate chips. So we're gonna tear this. And I'm just gonna tell you, I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. It's the same as 2 12-ounce bags of chocolate chips. So what I meant was like, for it to be a great thing, because I was thinking about this. Like I remember thinking, I'll know that I have like a real adult when I don't have, like I have enough socks and underwear that I don't have to do laundry like 2 or 3 times a week. And I'll have enough that I can go like 2 weeks. And I knew that I was an adult where I could have like a whole lot of chocolate chips that I wasn't going to use and just put in the cabinet and have some for the next time without having to go to the store. Is that dorky? Okay, next thing, these chocolate chips. Okay, and there's not a whole lot that's going to happen to those except for them to get distributed throughout. They need to get distributed throughout the dough. So that just takes a second. Okay, now I'm going to add our 4 beaten eggs. And let's see, just for fun, how much those 4 beaten eggs weigh. We want them to weigh about 200 grams. They weigh 205. And like I said, when you're at home, you don't want to have 5 grams of eggs hanging out in your fridge. So I'm just going to go ahead and use them. And I'm going to pour those in. So I have that mixture that looked like soil. And I added the chocolate chips just to get them distributed throughout. And I added the eggs, and I'm only mixing it enough to get this to come together. Just like you would pie dough. When you add that liquid to the pie dough, only mixing it enough to get it wet, not to further incorporate it and not to further mix the dough and create gluten. Okay, so I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so I knew that I could stop mixing when that egg sort of made its way all the way throughout the dough. And you saw that it took just a few seconds. Now, this is something I'm going to show you that will happen often in a professional bakery. Like in a professional bakery, we would be making a batch like maybe even 10 times this size in like a really, really large mixer. And then what we might do is dump it out onto a sheet pan. So these are standard size. This is a half sheet pan. It's like 12 by 16. And there are a few reasons that we do this. Okay, you want to scrape. I'm going to save you right now. I'm going to save you the embarrassment. When you're working in a bake shop, get that bowl scraper and get everything out that you possibly can, because you don't want your pastry chef to call you over if you have left a little bit of dough down in here and say, look it, you could have scraped this out, and they will scrape that dough out for you, and then they'll weigh it, and then they'll say, okay, look it, you wasted a half ounce of dough. If you did that every day for a year, and I charged $3 for those cookies, and that I would have lost $450. So yeah, scrape it all out. Don't wait for that speech. Okay, so that is one reason that we do it here, is just so that we can make sure that what we have on the bottom matches what we have on the top. We don't want that fat to accumulate down in the bottom of the bowl. And then when you go to bake the cookies, where we have that little blob of fat, it's going to just create an explosion. So we can make sure that that's thoroughly incorporated. And when we go to shape these cookies, like often, and we're not going to do it this time, but often we would take like an ice cream scoop. So if you think if you had like one of those 20-quart bowls or an 80-quart bowl, and every time that you needed to shape a cookie, you reached in that bowl, that is wasting a step. It's not really ergonomically the best thing that you can do for your body. And always think about, how can you preserve your body? How can you get yourself to be comfortable working for as long as you want, as long as you can. So if this was the case, we would have it on this pan, we would just take our scoop and we just do this. And that's much easier than having to reach over and down. Another thing is, like if you had someone working across the table, this would be in the middle. You could both be working on it at the same time. Okay, so it's not unusual to go ahead and dump it out onto a pan before you shape it. Okay, another unusual thing about this particular formula and this particular technique when it comes to cookie baking is these cookies, you want to be careful to keep the dough really nice and loose, not to compact it. And I mentioned before, one of the secrets to success is consistency. You want quality and consistency. So each of these has to weigh the same, so that, number one, if you're charging by the piece, the guests all have the same size. And number two, they need to bake at the same time. If we had one that was smaller, it would bake faster than the ones that were larger. So this particular bakery, this is when we're going to switch to ounces. They do their cookies in 6-ounce pieces. Okay. So I'm just going to keep going through, this whole quantity of dough, scaling out these 6-ounce pieces. I'm not going to take the time to do all of these, just because it would be boring for you. But this is what I want to let you know is, when I get down to it, if I have like this much dough left, that's not going to be a 6-ounce piece. It's 2.7 ounces. I don't want to have this 2.7 ounce cookie here. So I have a couple of choices. I could put this in the walk-in and, use it in my next batch, or I can, and this is the reason that I don't shape these yet, I can go back and I have this whole pan, where I have like 20 of these cookies, and I can just take a little bit of this dough and add it to each cookie. And then they're all the same size again. Okay, so when it comes time to shaping these cookies, I'm being really gentle with this, really delicate. All I'm doing is sort of like encouraging it into a ball. I'm not packing it into a ball, because I want them to stay really kind of crumbly, fall apart, tender after they're baked. Okay, another trick, making cookies in volume or in mass. What I'm going to ask you to do is, instead of taking this, because we typically chill cookie dough before we bake it, instead of taking this dough and putting it in the fridge and waiting for this to get cool, it makes more sense for me to go ahead and portion it, because this is going to cool down so much faster than this. These will be ready to go in the oven in like 20 minutes. This would take like over an hour. The reason that we typically chill cookie dough is because it will spread more if you put warm dough in the oven. So if we have dough that we've been working with, that butter has had a chance to get warm and it's soft, it hits the oven and just like splat. And sometimes that's desirable. We want like a really thin, lacy cookie, but not for this. So this would need to be chilled first. Okay, that's the story of our cookies. I want to sit over here and talk to you for another quick minute before I send you on your merry way. That's my awesome dad, right there. That's my awesome dad. And that's my baby brother. And he's awesome too. Okay, this is what I want to show you. So we are going to have a little bit of an exercise that goes hand in hand with this video. Nothing tough, I promise. Think back to module 1 and the activities page. So if you go to module 1, look at the activities page, you have a link to this. This is the King Arthur flour website ingredient weight chart. So just go ahead and click on that. It's going to take you here. And if you look through here, you're going to see we used all-purpose flour. There are 120 grams in a cup of all-purpose flour, 4 1/4 ounces in a cup of all-purpose flour, not 8 ounces. You know, we think about the 8 ounces in a cup, but that's water, milk, things like that. So I'm going to have you use this chart, and we're going to take the ingredients that we use today and we are going to go backwards. We're going to go from grams and we're going to turn it into cups. And check out the assignment. I'll have some more specific instructions for you when it comes time to doing that assignment. I'll go ahead and tell you right now. The assignment's going to be for extra credit because a lot of this is new to a lot of people. Eventually, you're going to need to do this for credit, but for this week, it's for extra credit, okay? This is the tool that you're going to use if you'd like to do that extra credit. I really encourage you to do it, whether you want to turn it in or not. So we did a total of, I don't remember, 400 grams of all-purpose flour. So then we would take the 400, divide it by 120. I think it comes to like 3.75. So then that would be 3 3/4 cups of flour, okay? Work on that. And I really encourage you not to worry about converting metrics being scary. This right here will do all the work. And I hope that you saw that like scaling is very, very easy. And I went really slowly today because I was talking as we were going. But if you were in your kitchen and you're doing this and you just had your list of ingredients and your scale and your ingredients, bam, 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 you throw it all in there and mix it up and you are good to go. Scaling is a great way to start getting faster with your baking. It's certainly something that you would typically do in a professional bakery, a professional kitchen. Let me stop sharing. Okay. Good to see y'all. And please always hit me up with any questions and take really good care. I will talk to you soon.